Bruce Dyer is a man who, in my opinion, leads from the front, leads by example. Really, I tip my hat off to you, and personally I wish you every success, that you help us to swing the votes in a strategic way that we actually make a difference. So without further ado, I'd just like to welcome and introduce. Come on up. Thank you.
I'd like to welcome you to the launch. Firstly, there are a number of thanks to you all for coming, to Tejas and Vicky for being able to use their wonderful cafe, to Alan, who's just introduced me, who was responsible for the splendid website that we have. I'd like to thank Alex, my son, who did the logo, and also Gayatri Fernando, who did some initial work on the website. I'd like to thank my wife, late wife, who for her loving support, and to P.R. Saka, who's provided the inspiration for me to stand here today. So, what I've prepared is firstly a bit of background to myself, and answering the question of why a political party now, and further to that, why a new model, and finally some key party policies. So, by way of background, I was born in Gisborne, and when my parents parted and my mother moved to Wanganui, we went there, and then to New Plymouth when she remarried, and subsequently to Wellington, where I did a postgraduate degree in economics. But the real turning point for me, I think, in terms of finding direction in life was when I started to meditate, and around that same time, in the 70s, I came across the social and economic theory that called progressive utilization theory. And it's that theory that underpins the policies of the Progressive Party, and their holistic policies, their holistic theory, basically. It's a spiritually based one. And on reflection, I've been attempting to ground that theory for a long time. So with my work, I was working 23 years ago. I was part of the establishment of the Nelson Enterprise Loan Trust, and that since its inception, we've made 300 loans worth $2.5 million, and many of those businesses wouldn't have had the opportunity to emerge if they hadn't had the opportunity to avail themselves of funding from us. So that as far as work is concerned, as far as where I live is concerned, has been an attempt to ground the theory as well. So 15 years ago, my wife and I purchased a property in 7-acre property in the Motueka Valley, and we saw it as being the opportunity to establish a Prout cooperative. We bought it with a friend, or with a partner. In the event the partner didn't stay, and so we had to rejig our ambition, shall we say, but it remains a resource for Proutists. The third way of trying to ground the theory is in the study that I've done. So 3 years ago I completed a master's in, and the subject of that master's thesis was what are the merits and scope for implementing self-reliant policies in the Nelson regional economy. And the issue of self-reliance is a key dimension of Prout, the Prout theory. And finally, grounding the theory again, it has taken me to stand here today. You know, in other words, move to, so that's in terms of work, where I live, study and politically. So that brings me to the question, well, why a political party now? I've been inspired by the emergence of other Prout-based parties, I have to admit. Like in India, they've been there for the last 2 or 3 decades. And 10 years ago, a Prout party was established in Germany. And currently, there's the emergence of a Prout party in Portugal. They're calling it Prouttugal. Which is I was hoping that we'd be able to use a name that was global, you know, just like the Greens, because if it's in India and Germany and Portugal and New Zealand, then it's not going to stop here. You can anticipate confidently, I believe, that it will become a global, present globally. So that's one answer to why the political party. Now another answer is that it's timely. The issue of, we've been faced with this pandemic, we've been faced with the global financial crisis, and both have had dramatic effects on New Zealand. And they've underlined the need, in the first instance, for us to develop a more self-reliant economy. A reliance that means that we're able to relate to the rest of the world from a position of strength. And at the moment I see us being, I don't believe that is how you describe the New Zealand economy. And if we're not relating to the rest of the world from a position of strength, then we're more able to be exploited or taken advantage of. And just as being self-reliant is true for individuals, I think it's true for countries. And in my experience, if I've needed to learn a lesson, then I often get knocked or hit. And if I don't learn the lesson at that time, then I get hit again. And I think that's, I see that is what's happening globally. We've had the global financial crisis, we've had the pandemic, we've got climate change. All of these suggest to me that it's time for us to rethink what's going down in a substantive way. It's not a superficial issue we're talking about here. But the question is, you know, notwithstanding those hits, are we waking up to the need for change? It can't be business as usual. So why, and that brings the issue of the need for a new model. I was impressed with our Prime Minister, Jacinda, saying that capitalism has been a blatant failure in relation to housing. 2 weeks ago, I came across a lecture given by by Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General. He gave it 2 weeks ago. And in that lecture, he makes the point that COVID-19 is exposing the lie that free markets can deliver health care for all. Okay, so what Jacinda and Guterres, they're both saying that the market system alone is not delivering adequately, you know, in strong language. And I'm also impressed with the fact that Jim Bolger, who was Prime Minister for about 9 years and led a government that embraced the neoliberal capitalist model, recently, as part of the Ninth Floor television series where Guy and Espiner interviewed prime ministers, Bolger explicitly said that we need a new model. I've actually written to him to tell him what we're doing, but the question of whether he responds remains to be seen. Yeah, so that the model that we're offering is underpinned by the social and economic theory that I've referred to, the Prout theory. And it's holistic, it's got a spiritual basis, and to I firmly believe that holistic perspective provides the basis for us to anticipate too. We can rely on that ingredient as having the capacity for transformation. And just to understand the significance of the spiritual dimension, if you'll allow me, I've got a quote from P.R. Sarkar, who propounded the theory in the first instance. And he says, "The ownership of the universe lies with the Creator. None of the movable or immovable property of this universe belongs to any particular individual. Everything is the common patrimony of all. We mustn't forget, even for a single moment, that the entire animate world is a vast joint family, and nature has not assigned any portion of this property." So I think, to me, that quote grounds the notion of spirituality. So I turn now to just some of the key, some of the policies that the party would be offering. We see the need for there being a guaranteed, that is guaranteed by the government, guaranteed purchasing power for everybody. And the purchasing power, that is to meet the needs, their basic needs, that is food, clothing, housing, medical care and education. And that guaranteed purchasing power is not there. It's not going to be delivered by way of benefits. The idea is that the significant effort made to ensure that there are jobs that are available. Of course, there will be exceptions, you know, people who are disabled, etc. But that's the general. I'm sure you'll get the general drift. Tackling inequality. And the way that would be tackled would be that we'd link lowest wages to the highest. At the moment, people on the highest, their wage or their income is sometimes like 300 times or more what people at the lowest are getting. Quite out of sight. It's not a society that's moving together when you've got extremes like that. And they're not extremes that, if there's a finite resource that we're dealing with in terms of, and if some people are taking more than their share, then it follows that the people at the bottom are going to miss out. There are 3 tiers of industry. The party supports small business, a strong cooperative sector, and key strategic industries which would be operated as public utilities. So as far as small business, and Statistics New Zealand came back to me with the information that 93.6% of small businesses employ less than 9 people, or up to 9 people. So that's a huge quantity, in terms of, that's the predominant, and that would remain pretty much as it is for businesses that are providing a non-essentials. So that's at one end. At the other end, you've got key industries, or key or strategic, and those businesses would be businesses that would tend to be monopolistic, like railways or energy distribution and generation, or telecommunications. And those industries would be they'd be public utilities owned by the local or national government. The businesses in between, that is, small businesses that had essential goods or services, and up to the key industries, they'd be run as, or incentivised, shall we say, to run as cooperatives. So you could include in that, for example, supermarkets. I was struck looking at the rich list, the last rich list that came out, by the number of the increase in those who were moving into that rich list, who were owners of supermarkets. So supermarkets would be one. That is to say, you'd have employees as well as customers would be members of that supermarket cooperative, in just the same way as farmlands has their staff and their client, their farmers, or the people who buy from them as members. So it'd transform the ownership of. Just imagine if you were had a stake in, that is to say, in New World or wherever it was, instead of all the profit being centralised in one person. So supermarkets, rest homes is another, banks are another. The list could go on and on. And clearly, this is not going to be something that's going to happen overnight. One way we see that happening is that the staff would be enabled to purchase shares in the business, and when those shareholdings got to 50% and over, then they would be in a position to appoint a CEO. So one or two other policies: replacing income tax and GST. How would you go about that? And one key way would be there'd be royalties on industrial production. So that'd be a key shift. In other words, instead of the the production would be, the tax would be on goods that are produced or services that are produced. In addition to land tax on unimproved land value, selective tariffs to promote the development of local manufacturing, taxes on pollutants and bads. Bads, I think, would include alcohol, cigarettes, that type of thing, and sales tax on luxuries. Another policy would be requiring government departments and rolling that out to business to produce audits with a bottom line, an audit that covered a bottom line that was more than just the financial bottom line. So those bottom lines would include, apart from profit, you'd also have people or the social, you'd have the planet or environmental, and you'd have the fourth one would be purpose. And that purpose encompasses a holistic, a more holistic dimension. And if you think about it, in the present Parliament, we've got National representing profit, to my mind, Labour ostensibly representing people, and the Greens ostensibly representing, well, not ostensibly, the Greens representing the environment. But there's no party that represents purpose, which is something that would be a feature of a progressive, progressive representation in Parliament. Just three more that I wanted to draw attention to were regional self-reliance. For example, sourcing food within a radius, so that, like for example, a Countdown doesn't purchase anything that I'm aware of locally. Fresh Choice make a point of sourcing food locally. So that would be a means of encouraging local production, that businesses knew that they had the opportunity to market their goods through that outlet. As far as energy is concerned, exploring the scope to enhance electricity generation in the area. I'm very conscious of the fact that there's the likelihood, I believe it's something like a 30% likelihood that within 50 years there'll be another alpine fault earthquake of magnitude something around 8. We're looking at huge disruption, and our energy supplies in this region would fail largely in the face of that. Two others that are housing. We'd foster cooperative housing. We seek state-owned enterprise to establish a housing cooperative, a housing construction, and only citizens and residents would be able to buy houses and own land. We don't believe that non-residents should have that right, and that's not uncommon globally, actually. But it exposes this country to a competition which is pushing the prices up. That's one of the factors of why the prices in this country is high. And finally, for the education, we propose that along with mindfulness and meditation, that neo-humanism be taught. What's neo-humanism, you might ask? And it's it's the practice of training the mind through meditation and mindfulness to see oneness in all. So in conclusion, we can be confident that the holistic model will bring about the transformation of society. I think without that holistic perspective, the scope for that transformation recedes. And I believe this is the real work. With this model and working together, I believe we can ensure the happiness and bring about the all-round welfare of all. Thank you.